Marvel Legends is the largest, the deepest, most innovative action figure toy line of all time. But it had to start somewhere. This is the origin of Marvel Legends. Hey y'all, and welcome back to Carbon Scoring, the best place for comics history and action figures. We're about to go chronologically through every Marvel Legends figure ever released, all coming directly from my personal collection. But before we get started, we've got to pay our respects to the figure that made it all possible, that original Spidey from the first Spider-Man Classics wave. In response to the incredible figures being put out by McFarlane Toys, Toy Biz began shifting away from their expansive 5-inch line and started experimenting with collector-friendly 6-inch 1/12 scale action figures. While these featured more paint apps and detailed sculpting, the secret sauce was adding unprecedented levels of articulation in a mass-market figure. This combination of comic-accurate sculpting and mind-blowing articulation started the revolution known as Marvel Legends, whose first assortment featured the heaviest hitters of the Marvel Universe: Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, and Toad? Okay, so there's a little bit more to the story. Jesse Falcon was the project manager on Spider-Man Classics, and he wanted to expand the idea of highly articulated 6-inch action figures to the entire Marvel catalog. His boss, the legendary Joanne McLaughlin, was all in on the idea. So Joanne told Jesse to get that first wave to market fast. So in order to complete the initial assortment, he scooped up a figure from the canceled Evolution of X line. And voila! Toad became a Marvel legend. Now that we know how we got here, let's start out by taking a look at what I still consider to be one of the greatest action figures ever made, Series 1 Captain America. This thing hits every highlight of Cap's classic costume. The star, the stripes. He's got his boots and his gloves with the cuffs. It even has all of the little details, like if you look closely, the chainmail pattern is actually in the upper part of his torso. Now, later figures would actually sculpt that in, but the way that it is done here is very reminiscent of the 1980s comics. Of course, he's got that Marvel Legends articulation, and I wish they had stayed with these hip joints. His shield, while this one's taken a little bit of a beating, is still one of the best they've ever done because it has a clasp as well as rubbery straps. And what that means is you could mount it over his shoulders with the rubbery straps, or you could clap it on just like it is here onto his wrist. Also, with the bending fingers, you can have it where he's actually holding the shield like he would in the comics. Plus, the colors on this are perfect. The thing that really makes this figure at an absolute brilliant one for me, though, is this head sculpt. So, as a kid growing up in the 1980s, John Byrne was the definitive Marvel artist. He had done his epic runs on X-Men and Fantastic Four, but he also drew essentially every character in the entire Marvel Universe, and that includes a brief stint on Captain America with Roger Stern. But it was his look, his facial design for Cap that I think this figure most closely captures in a way that no figure has ever since. Now, obviously, Cap has shown his age. The plastic at his pelvis joint and his neck have started to wear off, and I've lost a little bit of his wingtips on this one. But still, this is how you come out of the gate swinging with one of the best Captain America action figures ever made. I feel pretty much the same about this Iron Man as I feel about Captain America. I think they absolutely crushed it. Sure, he's maybe a little bit bulkier than what we've seen with subsequent Iron Man figures, but I think that actually works for a character who's supposed to be wearing a suit of armor. And they got all of those 70s, 80s details right. The little area around the cuffs of the boots and the gloves, the power outlets and the Omnibeam, the energy packs that are on his hips, and of course that guard over his shoulders. And you talk about these shoulders, with those articulated hands, you can get his repulsor beams up, but with these really bold early butterflies, they can come right at you. And I think that even though that looks kind of crazy from the back, it still works so well from the front. Plus, we're starting to see the level of detail that Toy Biz puts into these. Look at the gradation of paint on the yellow parts, that there's just a hint of orange overlay across them, even across the mask. And the mask is removable, featuring an incredibly beautifully sculpted Tony Stark head underneath. Put this all together, and it's still one of my favorite Iron Man figures. But the Toy Biz line was famous for variants, and while I don't have every single one of them, thankfully I do have the Steve Ditko version of Iron Man. You can see that the gold is a little bit deeper, darker, richer gold, but there's still paint overlay there. But of course, the main difference is that spiked helmet that harkens back to when Steve Ditko redesigned Iron Man's look and began the entire red and gold era. You still have the great facial sculpt underneath, but this is a very worthy variant, one that I picked up at like an EB Toys in the mall in Gainesville, Florida. And these figures came out, they were like $8. Because this was a mall toy, it was like $10, and I debated on whether I should pick it up or not. Pretty glad that I did back in the day. And of course, we got the Jade Giant, the Incredible Hulk. Now, when you just hold him down, his proportions do look really crazy because these hands make his arms look like they're a million miles long. But once you get him into some poses, it doesn't really stand out. The head sculpt is such a great representation of that 70s, 80s Hulk look. And even like the veins popping out of his arms show such just incredible sculpted detail. He also has some crazy early Toy Biz butterflies, but what it does is it allows him to make that Hulk clap gesture, which is so important to the character that they added it to the new Maximum Hulk. And of course, the original version came with these rubbery fingers, which, while they do a great job of the Hulk clap, they're not really great for anything else. So they made a running change in the line and gave him bendable fingers. So this isn't truly a variant. This is more of just a running change as the series went on, but certainly you had to get the Hulk in the first wave of Marvel Legends. And rounding out the first wave, of course, we have Toad. Now, it's pretty obvious to see that this was sculpted for a different line. Instead of the classic 70s, 80s looks that we saw with Cap, Iron Man, and Hulk, this is a much more grotesque, but also a more detailed, intricate sculpt. I mean, the face on this Toad is just unmatched, but look at the articulation. Barely a joint here, nothing at the knees or at the elbows, a little bit that's hidden right there, and he does have sort of ball jointed shoulders. But like I said, this was meant for an Evolution of X 2-pack. They also did Storm and Wolverine. He's got this crazy frog accessory, and while no one would consider Toad one of the legends of the Marvel Universe, it's actually a pretty interesting inclusion in that very first wave. The second wave had a decidedly family flair, as it featured figures from the Fantastic Four. Wave 2 continues John Byrne's artistic influence on the Marvel Legends line, beginning with everybody's favorite Benjamin Grimm, the blue-eyed thing. Now, the head sculpt is pretty close to a John Byrne-looking head sculpt, but he's a little bit more furrowed in the brow. It's more the body shape that really encapsulates the way that Byrne drew the thing throughout the 1980s. But look at how awesome that detail is on the rocky sculpture of the thing. And while here, some of the paint gradation maybe didn't work quite as well, my version's maybe a little bit more yellow than orange up around the head, it still just looks so good, and those rounded shoulders are perfect. Now, unlike the Hulk, the bendy fingers on the thing actually work. You can actually crunch these down and they'll hold a position. So you can see that they're getting better at this as they go. Really great figure that still remains in my Fantastic Four display. But this Human Torch figure did step directly out of Byrne's run on the FF. You can see it in the design and look of the face and the way that the flame marks are drawn on his body. Now, if you look closely, you'll notice this is the Spider-Man Classics body. It's obviously been modified to put the flame effects on there, but the underlying base body here is the one that was used in that original Spider-Man Classics figure. This figure also had a running change. The original one did not have a symbol, a Fantastic Four symbol on the chest, and that's the one that I have up in my FF display still. This one did have the FF, which was more of a 90s version of Human Torch, and I actually rubbed it off, but that was a running change of adding the 4 flaming symbol right there onto Johnny's chest. If you're picking up on a theme, then you're right on target because this was very much a Fantastic Four centered wave with arguably the greatest villain in all of Marvel, Doctor Doom, coming in next. This is a good one. It captures the armor, and of course, the armor allows for these joints and the articulation to be hidden. He does have a really nice cape, but one of the things that I always thought was super cool, they sculpted in his little rocket jets back there. Didn't have to do that, but it's a crucial part of Doom's character. Plus, he comes with his pistol that fits nicely in the holder, and as many of these early Marvel Legends, you can remove the mask and there's a scarred Doom head underneath. Though there were 2 versions of this, and this actually may be the more scarred version that came in the Fantastic Four 4-pack or 5-pack, the gift box set. But anyway, you can see Doom underneath. There was also a version of a Doombot that was released as a variant, and that thing was super rare. I never saw one in stores. I only have the original Doctor Doom. The final figure in Wave 2 was Namor the Submariner, and this was one of the first controversial picks for the line because for a line that was titled Marvel Legends and was clearly going for the most classic versions of each one of these characters, they chose the 70s vested Namor look instead of the little green swimmy trunks look. And I think part of that was because there is a ton of reuse on this figure. Toy Biz actually had the WWE or a wrestling license at the time, and they utilized different parts from wrestling figures to make this Namor. And for that reason, he's a little bit out of scale with the rest of the figures in this wave. You can see he is significantly taller than Doom, and it comes from reusing those parts. That being said, tell me there's been a better Namor head sculpt. I don't know that there actually has. Really great figure, but the beginnings of seeing some of the things that it takes to get a line going and to keep it going are present here in this Namor. Let me know if you guys are enjoying this chronological look at every Marvel Legends figure ever produced. This is a big project, and I'd love to hear your feedback about it. And as always, subscribe to Carbon Scoring, because we're bringing you quality content like this every week. More of the heaviest hitters show up in Wave 3, as well as our first movie figure. If Doom was the first major villain in Marvel Legends, certainly Magneto had to be the second. And this one captures his power and grandeur so well. Yeah, it's a reutilization of the Iron Man body that we just saw. There's the shoulder separation. Here's a belt over the top of Iron Man's pelvic piece. But you get new sculpts with the boots and the gloves, and of course, this perfectly rendered neck piece coming over here, as well as this gorgeous flowing cape that does have paint overwash. You can see how it's bringing out the folds and the different colors of his cape. But where Marvel Legends completely excelled was on head sculpts. And this captures Magneto so well. Not only that, but you get this gorgeous helmet. And as we've seen with other figure lines, it is really hard to get a head and a helmet to work well in proportion with each other. But this figure completely captures it to the point where you can even see his eyebrows peeking out underneath. Still a gorgeous Magneto figure, even 20 years later. Can you believe it took until Wave 3 to get Wolverine in the line? Yeah, different times. And this Wolverine was just a hodgepodge creation trying to get him in as quickly as possible. This, much like the Toad figure that we saw in Wave 1, is a reuse of the Evolution of X Wolverine comic figure. There's no articulation here. He's pre-posed. The mask has a much more kind of human realistic, more so than comic look with the visible pupils and the look there. What they did was they added articulation to this figure. They chopped up the waist. They put in a ball at the hip. They hodgepodge some things down here at the ankle, and they created a Marvel Legend articulation style out of a figure that really was never designed to be that way. Now, Wolvie did get a variant coming with this awesome unmasked version. And you talk about revealing the full fury of Wolverine. Again, Toy Biz's unprecedented paint apps really bring out the character of this figure. Rounding out our big three of the Avengers is the mighty Thor. And buddy, he is mighty. This figure is massive. I think once again, it may have reused some of their wrestling figure parts, and that's why he's a little larger than everybody else. But for Thor, it really doesn't matter. And it allows him to hold this huge, billowing, giant cape that he has. His articulated fingers are perfect for holding Mjolnir, which is the ultimate accessory. And just look at that carved and chiseled face sculpt. So good. This is a classic Thor. The paint overwash really brings out the details. And even though he had some reuse and maybe wasn't quite as articulated as other figures, this one stayed in my display for a long time. The Danny Ketch Ghost Rider figure was another slight departure from the focus of the line. If you're thinking about Marvel Legends, you would have thought that they would have done Johnny Blaze first instead of the very popular at the time 90s Ghost Rider of Danny Ketch. But the execution of this figure makes it fully worth it. Look at that flaming skull. It is so great. And all these little rubbery spikes all over his leather costume. So good. And as far as articulation, there are really well hidden butterfly joints back here, which become completely necessary when you realize that this $7 action figure came with his bike. Yeah, in the same package, you got the 90s Ghost Rider bike. It's got little wheels underneath, and it also has pinholes so that you could mount it to the wall if you wanted. This was incredible value. Plus, there was a comic book that came in each one of these packages as well. Really brilliant stuff. And finally, in Wave 3, a bit of an interesting inclusion with the movie Ben Affleck Daredevil. Now, you can see with the way these hips and these shoulders were done that this was not really originally meant to be a Marvel Legend. The rumor always was that this figure was sculpted for a Daredevil action figure line that when the movie didn't do as well, just never was produced. And so they snuck it into the Marvel Legends line to get it out to the public. And I have to say, even with only his nose and mouth exposed, you can actually really see the Ben Affleck in this sculpt. A cool, oddball inclusion in the line. Some of the greatest articulation innovations, as well as some serious sculpting failures, made their way into the line with Series 4. I'm not going to claim that Marvel Legends peaked with Wave 4, but you can make a really valid argument that this Beast figure was the finest one done in the entire line. It is, for my money, the perfect combination of sculpt and articulation. Look at that head sculpt, even with an articulated jaw. It just brings out everything that you want from Hank McCoy's Blue Beast. But then you get into the remarkable articulation of this figure. Sure, if you have him sort of just standing up, those hips look a little bit weird, but this figure is built to get down into an incredible crouching pose. And with the level of articulation at the knees and at the ankles, the way that he can bend, it works beautifully. I mean, everything about this figure is pure perfection. Truly one of the strongest entries in the line. I've always been a big fan of this Gambit figure. I like his slim frame, and the addition of his soft goods overcoat, really cool. He's got unique fingers where he can throw his cards. There's great paint wash and detail all around the figure, but it comes down to that smirking head sculpt that really looks like something that stepped out of a Jim Lee X-Men book. So great. Now, this figure has the new kind of slim body that we're going to see over and over again as we go through these figures, including these crazy ball hips that became sort of the hallmark of Toy Biz's Marvel Legends run. But on its first appearance with this Gambit figure, it totally works. I'm an 80s kid, so my Punisher wears white boots and white gloves, and it is perfectly captured on this figure. Great skull where the ammo makes up the teeth, but where this figure really stands out is look at all of the personality in that head. Look at the furrowed brow, the wrinkles up above his eyebrows. Look at his chin and the way that his nose is scrunched up. That really encapsulates the personality of the Punisher in a way that maybe no other figure has since. Just a great, great version. He came with multiple guns and just really was Frank Castle personified. Our first female in the line was an interesting choice in Elektra. And overall, from a distance, this is a good figure. But when you really start to look at it, there's some major problems with their design for this one. It's a good Elektra head sculpt that is ruined by this neck joint. Why on earth you would design it to have the neck joint going right there and killing the look of the figure is beyond me. Her tiny little pixel arms are just very, very fragile. And then the waist piece, sorry, that's where it's gotten stuck to the rubbery plastic, is so weird. The way that the hips bend coming down to these flimsy little ankles. You gotta start somewhere, and unlike the Beast from this wave, this will never go down as the height of Marvel Legends. From X-Men to the FF to movie figures to a cosmic duck, Wave 5 had a little bit of everything. We have to start off this 7-figure wave with the absolutely beautifully sculpted and mammoth Colossus figure. Oh, this thing is so good. Look at the level of detail of his metallic skin. Look at the way his chiseled face brings that out with the pointy hairdo. Oh, his back, the back musculature has always been so impressive. This is a big, big boy. But because of, again, an innovative articulation scheme, you can really get him into some incredible poses. There's also great paint wash here. This one's faded out a little bit. Again, these are over 20 years old, and so now this doesn't quite match. But if you can imagine how great this thing, I mean, it still looks great 20 years later, but coming right out of the package, this was an absolute colossus of power. I've always been partial to this Silver Surfer figure for a couple of reasons. Partly because of this great blue paint wash that encompasses the head and the rest of the body, just bringing out that spacefaring look. But also the fact that his head sculpt kind of is like a Close Encounters of the Third Kind alien look. It really brings out sort of that extraterrestrial aspect of Norrin Radd's character. Now, he's on the body that we're going to see a lot more with the big ball hips and the big ball shoulders. It works better on Surfer than it does on most, but one of the great things about this figure are these magnets on his feet because, yep, he came with a surfboard with magnets on it. Oh my gosh. You could fly this thing around your living room anywhere you wanted to go, and his feet would stay in position. I wish that they would bring this back because it gives you so many more options for posability than the standard pegs that are required on surfboards now. So, so awesome. And he came with the completely nonsensical Howard the Duck, who, my Howard, the head has broken off. Again, these things are pretty old, but it pops right back on, and it makes absolutely no sense that you packed in Howard with the Silver Surfer, but we get a classic 70s version of Steve Gerber's sadistic, sarcastic duck. Utilizing the same body as Norrin Radd, which is a little weird that Mr. Fantastic has the exact same frame as a wielder of the power cosmic, but we do get our first version of Reed Richards in line. Now, this is one that the original pictures that were published in the magazines had a completely different and arguably significantly better head sculpt than the one that finally came out with the figure. This Reed doesn't even have much as far as graying at the temples. I've never really been a fan of this head sculpt for Reed, but it is a great toy because you can pop off, oh, please don't break, you can pop off the arm piece and instantly put on some of his bendy pieces. So here's a giant fist with an underwire. I think there was also a saw arm that came with it. Cool stuff. Remember, These were designed to be sold to toys. The fact that a collector market was coming up was just a bonus. And of course, Toy Biz recognized that. They recognized that they were selling to two separate markets, the collector market as well as the toy market. And I think they managed to straddle the line between both perfectly. Sabertooth here is a big boy. This is a tall figure, and he has a similar articulation scheme to Colossus at the shoulders, but then he has those doofy ball joints down here at the hips. But it's all about the head sculpt, and this one is really great. He's got his mutton chops flailing out of his mask. He's got the whited out pupils and the screaming open mouth, overall making for a quality Sabertooth figure. Everybody's least favorite Nazi, the Red Skull, comes in next, and it's a decent little figure as far as sculpting detail goes. Obviously, that head sculpt is absolutely perfect, but I was today years old when I realized from the waist down, it's just a reuse of the Ben Affleck Daredevil body. I mean, it is the exact same sculpt, just reused a little bit. And what made me think about it was the lack of articulation at the shoulders. And there you go. So hey, you want to get a Red Skull in the line? Just cobble together a little bit of Daredevil and throw him out there. I have always loved this Nick Fury figure. It's on the Toy Biz base body that I think I prefer more than any others. It doesn't have the weird ball hips, but it's still got great ball shoulders. The shield costume just looks so good with his pistol in its holster there on his chest. The attachment with his shield jetpack with that perfectly rendered symbol, and it actually attached into a base where you could have him flying, was so good. But it's this Jim Steranko-esque head where he's just barking orders. And I remember back in the day, people would make like a little cigar to put in his mouth that would like perfectly fit in the corner there to really give him that 60s, 70s Nick Fury look. So good. And just like Daredevil before him, we get a sneaky movie figure inserted into the line with Wesley Snipes' Blade. Now, there's a lot of people that will say that the Blade figure from Blade 2 was really the true origin of Marvel Legends when it was talking about how they added in like toe articulation and everything like that. And I can buy that, but this figure is really good. Very great Wesley Snipes head sculpt. This jacket, though, is literally falling apart in my hands. Like it's sprinkling down black dust everywhere else. So I'm going to get him put away before he turns into dust like a vampire. Wave 6 brings us an assortment of X-Men heavy hitters and a vigilante from the movies who's ready to take them all down. $8 retail. That is what this mammoth hunk of plastic cost back in the day when you picked up Juggernaut. And it's still a pretty solid Juggernaut figure, although it's got some legitimate problems. Now, I do kind of like the Bane-esque veins popping out of his arms. And of course, you got to give him credit for the amazing head sculpt with those great neck muscles just straining out. So cool. But the figure literally does not have a waist at all. Like, that's something that we're going to see with some future Marvel Legends from Toy Biz, that they kind of forgot to put a waist on the figure, and his proportions are unbelievably boxy. But once again, $8 for this figure. Wolverine becomes the first character to receive a second figure in the line, and it could not have been better. We got that cobbled together tiger stripe Wolverine suit. Now we get him in his classic brown costume, and it looks so good. All new sculpting, a new, smaller body for Wolverine, so he completely fits in display with your other X-Men, as he is that shorter, wilder Canadian figure. But for me, it's again all about this head sculpt that I think truly evokes John Byrne's time on X-Men. This is still one of my favorite Wolverine figures. It just works so well in any display. If my kids ever ask me, "Hey Dad, what were the 90s like?" I'm just going to pull out this Cable figure and like, guys, we had giant shoulder pads full of missile armory bullet things with leather, and we all had metal arms and pouches all over our waist and chest, and our muscles were flexed out, and we had silver hair and shiny spotlights glowing out of our eyes. It was awesome. Oh, and also Pearl Jam and Nirvana. So good. This Cable figure is just the epitome of Rob Liefeld's look for the character. I love that it kind of harkens back to the X-Team costumes with that great blue and yellow, but it very much is about the vibe and the style of this guy, and it just cannot be beat. Our second female figure in the line is none other than Jean Grey as the Phoenix, and she utilizes the exact same body as Elektra, but it works a little bit better here, mainly because the black of her costume helps to hide that hideous neck joint. I also love the sash and the little soft rubbery aspects of the sash. Now, you've heard me throughout this video go on and on about how terrific Toy Biz's head sculpts are. Not going to do that here. That is not exactly the strongest head sculpt that we've seen. But, of course, she did have a variant as Dark Phoenix, and she does look better as Dark Phoenix for sure. And here I've got her on the Phoenix Force accessory that both of these figures came with, that again had the pinhole so you could mount this on the wall if you wanted to. Such a cool toy. One more sneaky movie edition in the line, this time Thomas Jane's Punisher. Now, I have given this character and this movie a little bit of flack previously on the channel, and I get nothing but overwhelming feedback that this is a good movie and that Thomas Jane was a really good Punisher. So I promise, guys, one of these days I'm actually going to go back and watch that movie. But until then, we just get to enjoy the fact that it did make it into the 6-inch line. And perhaps you have heard of this guy. None other than the Merc with a Mouth, Deadpool. This figure was so sought after back in the day because it was the first super articulated Deadpool figure, and it actually really captures Rob Liefeld's look. So it goes well with the Cable that also is based off of Liefeld's art, the original look of Deadpool. He's got a little bit of a pinhead in comparison to his body, but I think a lot of that is exaggerated by those crazy ball shoulders that Toy Biz was using. But perhaps my favorite part of this figure was his accessory, Doop. Yes, the Ecstatics version of Doop came with the Deadpool, and that is the reason why the brand new Maximum Series Deadpool also comes with a new Doop figure. If you think the figure selection for Wave 7 is impressive, just wait until you see what these guys come with. Another mammoth wave begins with another mammoth figure, this time in the form of Apocalypse. Now, just imagine how big this guy would be if he actually had a pelvis. Again, much like Juggernaut, the proportions here are way, way off, but no fear, Toy Biz is going to fix that soon enough in a future wave. This was a wave that was heavy on Avengers figures, and we're going to begin with the Silver Centurion version of Iron Man. Now, I will admit, this is again just that simple original Iron Man base body that I actually love so much, but with a lot of new features, and particularly this metal red, this almost, it's not vac metal, but it's almost this incredibly shiny metallic red really, really brings out the detail of this figure. Of course, because it's Toy Biz, you're going to get that great Tony Stark head sculpt, but that's not the coolest accessory. No, this bad boy came with an entire space launch system that you could fit right over the top. It would attach, it's got handles for him to hold, and it just is so freaking cool as a toy. It's really neat. Again, you can mount it to your wall. It's got incredible detail, and when you get it down, his eyes do pop up over the top. Just a cool, cool look for one of the better alternate versions of Iron Man's armor. Carrying on with our Avengers with accessories comes Hawkeye. Now, he's on the classic thin base body, but again, that head sculpt really evokes classic 80s Hawkeye. And his costume is really perfect with his little tunic and everything, and he's got his sort of high-tech bow, which is going to come in really handy. Now, Hawkeye doesn't have any superpowers, so to keep up with the likes of Thor and Iron Man, he has his Sky Cycle, which also came packed in. Look at all the details on this Sky Cycle figure that Hawkeye could sit on. But even this is not the best accessory because Hawkeye's quiver comes with extra arrows. You've got exploding arrows, you've got kind of a larger diamond tip arrow, you have a relatively standard arrow, but the one that really rules is the Ant-Man arrow, where you can recreate the famous Avengers cover where Hawkeye is shooting Ant-Man on his arrow. What an incredible attention to detail and such a cool feature for this figure. And a stalwart member of the Avengers and a necessity in any Avengers display is the Vision. Gorgeous colors here. They really pop. His rubbery cape with the appropriate curl up of the collar looks really good. That android head sculpt is spot on target. But one of Vision's superpowers is the ability to like phase and go through solid material. So thankfully, Toy Biz gave us a variant phasing Vision. So cool. Now, as you guys know, translucent plastic tends to be really fragile, so you got to be careful with this one. But they even phased out his cape. This is a variant that I sought out later, not something that I ever saw on store pegs, but I'm so glad that I have it because it is just one of the coolest Vision figures you'll ever not see. Okay, now we're getting into a real Marvel toy line because we're getting to our third Wolverine figure. And this time, it is the Weapon X version from Barry Windsor Smith's incredible Marvel Presents tale, giving the origin of Wolverine and his adamantium. And it is so cool, and it is so incredibly comic accurate. Now, we just recently, got a redo of this figure in the Marvel Legends line that is also incredibly comic accurate. But if you look, their helmets are very different. So how can I make the argument that they're both accurate? Well, it's because this helmet is based off of this piece of art from the storyline. You can see it's smoother. It doesn't have nearly as much detail or greebling. Whereas this helmet is based off of this piece of art from the storyline where all of these little tech bits and details are drawn out. So a really cool comparison of looking at two figures that are 20 years apart that both are doing exactly what we want, giving us comic accurate characters in our Marvel Legends line. You knew you couldn't keep a classic Ghost Rider down, not in a line titled Marvel Legends, and here he is, the legendary Johnny Blaze. Oh, I love how thin he is. I love the way that his leather jacket has like a little flap that's loose right there, the way the rubbery collar comes up around his skeleton, and of course, the articulated jaw that actually, if you look at the eye sockets, brings out the eyes when it's open. Look at that again. Oh, that is such a cool piece. The translucent hair works really well. And hey, man, this is Toy Biz Marvel Legends. He came with his bike. Absolutely. You get classic Johnny Blaze with his bike. And this isn't even the good one because the variant of this figure has the origin Johnny Blaze with his skull being melted off of his face is melted off of his skull. He's in the classic 70s blue jacket. He's got his original bike with the original shape. Oh my gosh, this is one of the best sculpted, best designed, best figures in the line. And I'm so glad that I picked up this variant of Johnny Blaze. We're up to Wave 8, and for the first time, we're getting multiple females in a wave, as well as multiple contemporary versions of some of our biggest legends. While the Marvel Legends line was doing its thing in stores, there was a parallel line of 6-inch figures called Spidey Classics, where some of the best figures of Spider-Man's bad guys ever made came through. But Doc Ock actually made his way into the Marvel Legends line proper, and it's a really good 80s Doc Ock. You can see he's got a great head sculpt with his classic bowl cut and his goggles. Again, he's missing that waist piece, so he's a little bit dumpy, but dumpy for Doc Ock actually works because they've got his little belly going on here. But this figure is all about these bendy wire tentacles that have articulated appendages on the end. Very cool. Still works really well. Still hold their position 20 years later. We're back to that original Toy Biz female body for Natasha Romanoff's Black Widow. Now, they actually did make a Yelena Belova chase variant of this figure, which I don't have, and I don't think I'm ever going to track it down, because even though there's some good with this, her Widow's Blast look really nice, that is a sleepy Natasha head sculpt that, again, is just crushed by this dumb neck articulation. Now, I like that she's got kind of her late 70s, 80s George Perez styled hair, but that's the nicest thing that I can say about this Black Widow figure. Thankfully, later on down the line, a Black Widow became the new gold standard in female Marvel Legends action figures. Another translucent action figure, this time Bobby Drake's Iceman. This figure actually is clear, and so you have to be very careful with the plastic because it's that brittle, clear plastic. So all of the texture, all of the look of this is done with paint wash and overlay, and it's absolutely amazing in that way. I know that a lot of fans actually could buy extras of this figure and they could take acetone and wash all the paint off, and then they could use it as a great custom base body. I know that Pixel Dan did that, but for me, I think it's actually a really good, just plain Bobby Drake Iceman figure. Okay, progress. In the exact same line, we're finally starting to see some new sculpting on a female figure with this gorgeous version of Storm. Gone is that awful neck joint, and now we've got a solid ball up there, which works really well given the amount of flowing hair that Aurora has here. Plus, this cape, even though it's gotten stuff stuck on it over the years, is terrific as it's attached at the shoulders and at her wrists. So when you have her in her classic Storm flying poses, this nice rubbery cape really does flow with that. A big time improvement and the start of good things to come. The line was called Marvel Legends, but with this wave, we began to see some more contemporary styles of action figures, beginning with this Mark 21 10-man armor for Iron Man. Obviously, all new sculpting everywhere, and the amount of detail in this one is just shocking. Look at how gorgeous this is, and when you combine it with Toy Biz's use of paint washes and overlays, it just really comes together as an incredible robotic Iron Man. But they haven't forgotten their roots because, nope, there's a Tony right underneath that mask. And it fits in pretty snug, thank God, because otherwise I would have lost this thing 20 years ago. Super cool, but he wasn't the only newer figure in this wave, because we also got the version of Captain America from the Ultimate comics at this time. Now, the Ultimates were kind of a more modern, realistic, kind of up-to-date take on the Avengers, and I don't think I got just what a not great character Captain America was in that book. He was kind of, the writer, Mark Miller, was making fun of kind of the Bush era politics of America at the time. And I just don't know that I was sharp enough to pick up on it, but I get it now. But it still makes for a really smashing action figure with his more militaristic look, the more, kind of functional boots and functional gloves, and just a really super great head sculpt. You can see some of the design changes from typical Captain America are a little bit of gray here and gray here. So Toy Biz, being smart, instantly re-released the figure in the line without those parts as a 616 Captain America. But either way you look at it, it is a really great Cap figure. How many times have I claimed that a figure is the best one in the line? A bunch, right? Well, I'm going to do it again with Man Thing, and it's all about the intricate details of this sculpt. Look at all the just organic material, the etchings, the carving out, the weeds and wires, even back here on the back where he has tree limbs coming out of his back. There's a tree kind of growing right down his spine. And of course, the sculpt is highlighted by the incredible paint wash details. Plus, that Man Thing head is as perfectly comic accurate as you would ever imagine. This guy's tall too. He towers over your other figures. And again, this was $8 on toy shelves back in the early 2000s. Can you believe the quality of this figure? The ninth wave of Toy Biz Marvel Legends was technically titled the Legendary Riders Wave, because each one of these figures came with some kind of doohickey for them to ride on. Let me tell you, it was a mixed bag. Let's start with one of the hits. This massive, imposing, gorgeous Hulkbuster Iron Man. This figure has become absolutely legendary because this is not what the Hulkbuster looked like in the comics. No, this was much more of a unique creation of the sculptor. But this look, this design is what went on to become featured in the MCU. So this toy actually inspired the future movie version. And of course, you've got a fully rendered, fully sculpted head with all of the scientific stuff right there inside. So cool, so big. And now for one of our misses. For a line titled Marvel Legends, this is the least legendary look for Ultron you could ever find. I don't know what this monstrositous doohickey is based off of, and it would be a criminally long time before we got a classic Ultron in the Marvel Legends line. Oh, now we're talking Days of Future Past Wolverine. Look at that worn out old expression with the graying temples. Love the soft goods leather jacket. And he's a runt. The proportions of this figure are absolutely terrific for Wolverine. I would have loved to have seen more Days of Future Past characters in this line, but if you had to have one, this is the one to get. Vengeance. This obscure, at least to me, Ghost Rider villain he's just a perfect toy. Look at this. He's got like ribs poking out, bones running up his chest, the little bones all around his gloves. He's got spikes. He's got a flaming mullet going on. I mean, what else could you want from an action figure? Oh, yeah, that's right. You want a flaming skull bike to go along with him. So, this figure, even though it's obscure as all get out, is everything that you want in your Marvel Legends. There are all kinds of rumors that exist to why this became the total failure of an action figure that it is. This Scarlet Witch is, bar none, the worst Marvel Legends figure ever, period. The only one that can come close is going to be the Emma Frost from the dark days of Hasbro. But wow, what a terrible, terrible action figure. Thankfully, Wanda has been redeemed. She's gotten numerous great figures since, but this one is so perfect in its awfulness that it will always have a place in toy history. This figure is billed as a first appearance Thing figure, and newsflash, it does not look anything like the first appearance of Thing. What it looks like is an absolutely beautiful recreation of the artwork of Art Adams. Art Adams, artist extraordinaire for Marvel Comics, was working with Toy Biz doing figure design at the time, and this figure is clearly based off of his artwork. You can see it in every line of the detail. Art Adams is one of the best artists, the best illustrators of monsters of all time. His fine line work is just so renowned, and you can see all of that in this Thing figure. This is not a bad Taskmaster figure. I mean, it looks a little cobbled together. It's obviously using bodies that we've seen used a million times before. Good, not great, but good head sculpt. You've got kind of the details. I really like the two-tone aspect of his cape, that you've got this brownish orange color here and white on the other side. He comes with a shield. He also came with like a sword and a gun. For a dude that could replicate the powers of anyone that he saw, his incredible acrobatic and athletic ability, it's a pretty decent figure. Wonderman comes in what I would consider his more modern look, not the classic 80s safari jacket Wonderman that I grew up with. It's a little bit of a sketchy figure. It's got a lot of sculpted detail here on the chest. He does have his rocket packs, but one of the cooler features is that he came with this yellow jacket accessory that simply pegged right into his lower back and appeared to be flying kind of right over his shoulders. A really cool addition to this figure, but thankfully they did make a variant version of this in his ionized powered up form. And this is the one for me that's the real winner. I love the way that purple looks. The uniformity of the sculpt and the plastic kind of takes away some of the problems with the detail of the figure and just makes for a much better Wonder Man figure. So if you're going to put one on your shelf, seek out the ionized powered up Wonder Man. Whew! We've made it through the initial waves of Toy Biz's Marvel Legends line. But what they were about to do next would change the industry forever. We're entering into the era of Build-A-Figures. So stay tuned because that video is coming soon. But in the meantime, for the best in comics history and action figures, subscribe to Carbon Scoring.